For years, Andy Lewis had built a reputation as one of the most recognizable figures in extreme sports. Known to many as Sketchy Andy, he had become famous for pushing physical limits in ways that most people would never consider. He held world titles in slacklining, set a Guinness World Record, and even appeared alongside Madonna during the 2012 Super Bowl halftime show. Yet in Moab, Utah, he had become just as well known for something else, introducing ordinary people to the world of tandem base jumping. One of those people was Barry Flint. In 2021, Flint booked a tandem jump with Lewis through Base Jump Moab. Despite the intimidating nature of stepping from the edge of a cliff, hundreds of feet above the ground, Flint later said he never felt unsafe. He remembered Lewis carefully inspecting every piece of equipment, checking harnesses, tightening straps, and explaining exactly what would happen. According to Flint, Lewis approached the experience with meticulous attention to detail. Once everything was ready, Lewis simply led him to the edge, counted down, and the pair stepped into open air. The experience left a lasting impression. Flint described it as feeling completely different from skydiving. Rather than fear, he remembered a sensation of freedom and calm. Afterwards, he spent time talking with Lewis and came away, feeling as though he had known him for years. The jump reinforced Lewis's reputation as someone who combined extraordinary athletic ability with a deep understanding of the risks involved. That is why the events of June 14, 2026 came as such a shock. On that day, Lewis was conducting another tandem base jump from a 350-foot cliff in Mineral Bottom Canyon near Moab. Harnessed to him was Danny Joe Kriegel, a 68-year-old businessman, husband, father, and grandfather from Arizona. During the descent, investigators say the parachute failed to fully inflate. Both men struck a rocky hillside, and emergency responders could do nothing to save them. Both of their time on this earth ended there that day. When Flint learned that a tandem jumper had been involved in a fatal accident, he later admitted that before any names were released, he somehow felt certain who it was. He said, "I was in shock, in tears." For many in the extreme sports community, the loss was difficult to process. Lewis had spent years demonstrating remarkable skill, while introducing countless newcomers to an experience few people would ever forget. His final jump serves as a reminder of the unique risks that remain present in a sport, where even extensive preparation and experience cannot eliminate every possible variable. On the afternoon of November 15, 1982, 7-year-old Jennifer Marteliz was doing something that thousands of children did every day. She was walking home from school in Tampa, Florida, and Jennifer had almost made it. She was just 1 block away from her family's home when she spoke briefly with a friend. According to investigators, Jennifer asked the friend to watch her as she continued toward her house. The friend looked away for only a moment. When she looked back, Jennifer was gone. No witnesses reported seeing a struggle. No confirmed sightings followed. Despite extensive searches, Jennifer was never found. The disappearance quickly became one of the most high-profile missing child investigations in Tampa's history. Helicopters searched the area. Detectives followed hundreds of leads. Family members on both sides were investigated and eventually cleared. Yet the central question remained unanswered. What happened during those final moments on Jennifer's walk home? Over the years, investigators focused attention on several individuals. One was Thomas Peter Welnicki, a family acquaintance who later claimed to have experienced a psychic vision describing Jennifer's disappearance. Authorities believed the account was suspicious because parts of the story appeared unusually specific, and Welnicki himself reportedly matched part of the description he provided. Despite long-standing suspicions, no charges were ever filed against him. Then, decades later, another lead emerged. A woman named Anna Cummings contacted investigators after recognizing similarities between Jennifer's case and memories from her childhood neighbor, Steve Wisnowski. The tip led police to search multiple properties in Pennsylvania using cadaver dogs, forensic specialists, and excavation teams. Investigators examined numerous locations, hoping they might finally uncover evidence that could explain Jennifer's fate. Nothing was found. Today, more than 4 decades after Jennifer vanished, the case remains unsolved. Her family continues to search for answers, still hoping that advances in forensic technology and renewed public attention may one day reveal what happened to the little girl who disappeared just steps from home. By 2006, Dr. Richard Root had already achieved more than most physicians could hope for in a lifetime. He had chaired departments of medicine at some of America's most respected institutions, including Yale, the University of California, San Francisco, and the University of Washington. He helped establish infectious disease programs, trained generations of doctors, and became internationally respected for his work, treating and researching infectious diseases. Colleagues described him as a gifted teacher whose influence could be found throughout modern medicine. But retirement did not slow him down. Instead, Root volunteered for a medical program in Botswana, where HIV infection rates were among the highest in the world. He spent his days treating patients, training young doctors, and teaching medical students. Friends said he was thriving. After decades in academic medicine, he found himself reconnecting with the hands-on patient care that had first inspired him to become a doctor. According to those who worked alongside him, he loved every minute of it. The day before his death, he returned from a clinic where long lines of patients had waited to receive care. His wife later recalled him becoming emotional as he described the experience. "That's why I'm here," he told her. On March 19, 2006, Root and his wife took a rare break from their work. While visiting the Tuli region of Botswana, they joined a guided canoe excursion on the Limpopo River. It was intended to be a peaceful wildlife tour through one of Africa's most beautiful landscapes. Then, everything changed. Root was traveling in the lead canoe with a guide, while his wife followed behind in another boat. Witnesses later said the canoe suddenly shook. A large crocodile, estimated to be between 13 and 15 feet long, emerged from the water and pulled him overboard without warning. His wife watched helplessly from behind as he disappeared beneath the surface. Search teams later recovered his remains near the site of the attack. He was 68 years old. What makes the story so sad is the contrast between Richard's 2 lives. After surviving decades in medicine, working through epidemics, teaching future physicians, and dedicating his retirement to helping others on another continent, Richard Root's life ended during a quiet afternoon, on a river he was simply trying to enjoy. For the people who knew him, however, the lasting memory was not how his time ended. It was that, right up until the very end, he was exactly where he wanted to be, helping people. On May 31, 2013, Richard Henderson did what he had done before. He went out to chase a storm. Unlike the professional meteorologists and research teams tracking severe weather across Oklahoma that day, Richard was simply fascinated by storms. A 35-year-old rancher, truck driver, and father of 2 boys, he enjoyed following dramatic weather when conditions allowed. That afternoon, another storm chaser photographed Richard's pickup truck near the developing storm. At that moment, nothing seemed too far out of the ordinary, at least for a storm chase. Richard was alive, excited, and doing what he loved. As the weather intensified near Reno, Richard began communicating with his friend George "Sonny" Slay by phone. He sounded upbeat. He told his friend he was having fun and joked that he might even appear on television because local news crews were nearby. At around 6:05 p.m., Richard sent a photograph he had taken from his cell phone. The image showed the massive tornado beginning to take shape on the Oklahoma plains. It would become one of the final photographs he ever captured. What Richard could not have known was that he was looking at one of the most unusual and dangerous tornadoes ever recorded. The El Reno tornado was growing at an astonishing rate. Hidden behind rain, it expanded to a record-breaking width of 2.6 miles and changed direction unpredictably. Even experienced storm researchers struggled to understand what it was doing in real time. A few minutes after sending the photograph, Richard was still on the phone with Slay when a loud noise interrupted the conversation. Richard reportedly said, "It's debris hitting my pickup." His friend immediately told him to get out of there. Moments later, the call ended. Richard's truck was later found in the tornado's path. According to family, investigators believe the storm had completely emptied the vehicle during the violent encounter, including Richard. The final image that Richard sent was not taken by a scientist gathering data. He didn't have to be there. He was simply a father with a strange hobby, standing beneath the Oklahoma sky, taking a photograph of a storm that fascinated him, completely unaware that only minutes remained between that picture and his time coming to a close. For most of the world, Ozzy Osbourne was the Prince of Darkness, the wild man who bit the head off a bat, the reality TV dad who constantly seemed confused by his own fame, the frontman whose voice helped create heavy metal itself. But before all of that, he was just John Michael Osbourne from Aston, Birmingham. He grew up in a small working-class house, struggled with dyslexia, left school at 15, worked a string of factory jobs, and even spent time in prison as a teenager. Music changed everything. After hearing the Beatles, Ozzy became convinced that somehow, against all odds, he was going to be a rock star. In 1968, he helped form Black Sabbath alongside Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward. Together they created a darker, heavier sound that would eventually become known as heavy metal. Albums like Black Sabbath, Paranoid, and Master of Reality transformed them from four working-class lads into one of the most influential bands in music history. Success, though, it came with a cost. For decades, Ozzy battled alcohol and substance issues. He was fired from Black Sabbath in 1979 and later admitted he believed his career was over. Instead, he reinvented himself as a solo artist, releasing classics like Blizzard of Oz, Diary of a Madman, No More Tears, and Osmosis. Along the way, he survived scandals, personal tragedies, lawsuits, health crises, and the loss of close friends. Time and again, he somehow found a way back. Then came an unexpected second act. In the early 2000s, the Osbournes introduced a completely different Ozzy to the world. Behind the larger-than-life stage persona was a husband, a father, and a grandfather whose family clearly adored him. Millions of viewers discovered that beneath the chaos was someone surprisingly warm, funny, and deeply human. By the 2020s, however, his health had begun to decline. Parkinson's disease gradually took away his mobility, and eventually he lost the ability to walk. Yet he never stopped talking about music. He never stopped planning the next project. He never stopped wanting to perform. That determination led to one final moment. On July 5th, 2025, Ozzy returned home to Birmingham for Back to the Beginning, his farewell concert alongside the original Black Sabbath lineup. More than 40,000 people filled Villa Park, while millions watched online. Physically weakened, Ozzy performed from a black throne. At several points, he visibly tried to lift himself and stand for the crowd, determined to give them everything he had left. 17 days later, he was gone. For someone who spent decades surviving the impossible, there was something fitting about the way his story ended. Back in Birmingham, surrounded by the music, the fans, and the city that made him. The final image in this video comes from the family podcast recorded during those last months. Looking at it now, it feels less like the Prince of Darkness and more like what he always was underneath. For most people in Southborough, Massachusetts, October 13th, 2005 is a date they will never forget. It was the night two sisters, Shauna and Meghan Murphy, were involved in a devastating incident that would leave a permanent mark on their family, their school, and their community. Years later, people still spoke about where they were when they heard the news. Even the local fire chief would later admit that not a day went by without him thinking about it. The final photograph in this case shows the sisters together before everything changed. Looking at it now, You can imagine these two going on to live long and happy lives. But that was not to be. Shauna was 17 years old. Meghan was 15. They were exceptionally close, sharing friends, interests, clothes, and the kind of bond that many siblings never experience. Friends described them as energetic, popular, compassionate, and full of life. At school, they were involved in sports, academics, and extracurricular activities. Shauna had recently been working on college applications and had taken the SAT. Meghan excelled in soccer, basketball, and lacrosse, while consistently achieving strong grades. Their future appeared wide open. During the evening of October 12th, the sisters attended a gathering with friends before beginning the short drive home. Just after 1 a.m., the Land Rover they were travelling in left the road and struck a utility pole on Northborough Road. The impact was catastrophic. When emergency crews arrived, they found the vehicle upside down and impaled on the broken utility pole. Live power lines had fallen across the wreckage, sending sparks and electrical arcs around the vehicle. According to first responders, someone inside was still calling for help, but rescuers could not immediately reach the occupants because touching the vehicle could have resulted in electrocution. They were forced to wait until the electricity could be shut off before beginning rescue efforts. Shauna and Meghan did not survive. Their friend Melissa Smith, who had been traveling with them, suffered serious injuries but lived. As investigators pieced together the hours leading up to the collision, witness statements painted a complicated picture. Several people reported seeing alcohol at the gathering earlier that evening, while others recalled concerns about whether Shauna should have been driving. Investigators also examined the role of speed. According to later findings, the vehicle was traveling significantly faster than the posted limit before the crash occurred. The story continued to attract attention long after the funeral services ended. Questions surrounding the gathering, the investigation, and whether charges should be pursued generated public debate throughout Massachusetts. Yet for the Murphy family, the focus was obviously loss and grief. Years later, Shauna and Meghan's father would speak openly about the tragedy. He reflected on how important conversations about safe driving can be, and admitted that warnings about excessive speed had not been something regularly discussed. Rather than retreat from public life, the family established the Murphy Sisters Foundation, which works to educate young drivers and provide crash prevention training for students. In many ways, that has become the sisters' legacy. Not simply the crash that ended their lives, but the effort to ensure other families never receive the same devastating phone call. Today, over 2 decades later, students who attend their former school were not even born when the accident happened. Yet the story remains part of the community's memory. The flowers, the memorials, the scholarships, and the lessons continue long after that final photograph was taken. Shauna and Meghan Murphy were young, hopeful, inseparable, and completely unaware of how quickly everything was about to change. When you're young, it's so easy to think that you are invincible. I've done many dumb things in my youth, and I'm grateful that I'm still here to tell the tale. But one thing that has no exceptions is do not ever drink and drive. Thank you so much for watching. I'm uploading daily true crime and dark content here on this channel, so make sure that you're subscribed, hit like on the video, and also drop a comment so you get shown more of my stuff. Please do be careful out there, and I'll see you tomorrow.